Hi everyone, welcome back to Brookdale Farm. Today we've got to have a look and try and work out why the PTO shaft on our Massy Ferguson 178 won't go into gear. The engagement lever for it is down here on the side of the differential just below the driver's seat, so down by your leg. Somebody's already broken the top off this. And the lever moves in the housing, but it doesn't. There's something further inside the rear diff that has jammed up on the engagement for it. So we're going to have to lift this top cover off today and have a look, and hopefully we can fix it without too much trouble, because I'm hoping to use this tractor on the hay baler next weekend. So we're going to start by taking the seat off, and the three-point linkage arms need to come off. Some of this bit needs to come off, and then there's a whole bundle of bolts around here, and I've got the engine crane, so hopefully we can just lift it off reasonably easily with the engine crane. So we'll start by undoing the two bolts that hold the seat on. I've got this in the shed today because I did an oil change on the rear diff and gearbox when I got the tractor, and so that oil is almost brand new, and I'm hoping not to have to change it when I do all of this. So we're going to take these three-point linkage arms off from back here on this joint. There's a stud in the middle there with a large washer on, and then these just slide off the spline here. Both these pins here are seized into the castings, so it's going to take a bit of work to wriggle them off. And if we undo them back here, that will just make it a little bit lighter for lifting this central housing off. So now we've got them off, there's a little cover plate here which I think has the oil pickup and probably the oil pressure relief valve for the hydraulics in it. Then there's a bundle of other bolts around here that we've got to undo to get this top plate off. So we'll get on and do that now. So like with everything on this tractor, there's always 4 times more to take off than you originally think you're going to have to. So the cover wouldn't lift straight off because there's a plate on this side with an adjustment to change how fast the hydraulics operate. To get this off, you've first got to take the foot plate off. Okay, so now that we have got the top cover off and drained the oil out, we can see 2 problems in here. So this is the main shaft that comes from the gearbox down to the diff. This gear on the front here is for when you want to put the PTO into the ground drive selection, and it does it by, see if I can get a good shot of it, moving this gear under here back to engage with this top gear. To move it into the power driven mode, which is what we want, this gear here should move forward and engage on this spline down here. Now this gear seems to be stuck on the shaft for some reason and not sliding properly. The other issue we have, if we can get a look down this side of it, it's quite hard to see anything in here, but this lever here is the PTO engagement lever. And if we look down here where my finger is, this end of the lever should actually be in this slot here. So at some stage when this cover was last installed, the lever has not been put in properly. Now I have had this cover off, and so it was probably me who put it back together like this, although I am pretty sure that this is how it was before I pulled it apart as well. But it's really hard to get in through that cover to see anything or to do anything. They say that you should take this cover off to access the oil filter, which is down in here. You put your hand in through that cover, unscrew the oil filter, drop it, and then spend the next half an hour trying to fish it out of there. So it's a bit of a strange spot for it to have an oil filter. Anyway, we're going to pull this cover back off now. There's quite a lot involved to get these covers off. I haven't put the foot plate back on from last time I had it off, but all the hydraulics have to unbolt, and then the cover can come off. We'll get that cog in there sliding, and then we will reassemble this with it in the right spot. Okay, so we've got this side cover off here. This model is similar in a lot of ways to the Massy 65. However, on this model they choose to bring the two hydraulic hoses out through that cover, which means you need to undo them in the gearbox before you can pull anything apart. And it's a bit of a nuisance. It makes it quite hard. They've got 3 O-rings in here that you undo, the 3 Allen keys that you undo to get in here, with O-ring joints on the inside here. This is the lever to put the PTO in and out of gear. We're going to try and get down in there now and see if we can work out how to free up that that shaft. So we've managed to get in here with the tyre lever and get this freed up. It slides forward into the engine drive position easily. It just catches a little bit when you slide it too far on the end of the splines. But for some reason, every time we try and slide it back into the ground drive position, it jams up again. So there must be something on those splines that has been damaged at some point, and possibly even the shaft has got a twist in it. Another thing that we have noticed in here, down the bottom here, there's an awful lot of iron filings in the bottom of this sump, and I don't know where they're all from, but we're going to give this a wash out with a bit of petrol before we put it back together. Okay, so we've cleaned out in here as best we can. We've washed it out with some petrol. We've also fished around in here with a magnet to try and get out as many of the iron filings as we can. There's a lot of spots for them to hide in here, so we're just gonna put it back together like this, and we're gonna do an oil change again on it quite soon. This one had an oil change just before seating, and I might try and get a plug with a magnet on it as well to try and help fish out a few more of the filings. So the first bit we're going to put back on is the lever for in and out of gear. Now this was broken off here, I've just welded a bit of an extra bit of handle on. I don't know how long it should be, I just had a guess at that. This is cast iron, and cast iron is tricky to weld. But I have had success in the past using a MIG to weld it. This doesn't have a huge amount of load on it, so I've just MIG welded this and we'll see how it goes. Now on this side, there's 2 points here where the hydraulic oil for the front end loader and the implements on the back come out. One is pressurized, one is the return. I'm not quite sure which way around it is. I've just put some new O-rings in here. The old O-rings were a bit hard and perished. There's paper gaskets on this surface, but I'm just going to use a bit of aviation gaskets elastic. I find this works quite well on water, anything with water and oil that has a paper gasket on it. This stuff's great. The container comes with a brush for putting it on. It gets everywhere, it sticks all over you. That means it's working. So we'll just put, this looks like it's oil with water in it. But anyway, it does work, and it does work very well. Put a bit around this surface here. Okay, so it's very hard to see anything down here in the gearbox at all. But we're going to try and get this in here, around everything else, and down to line up with where it needs to be. Okay, that looks like it's bolted up in place. And that seems to be moving. Okay, just need to turn it a little bit to line the splines up in there. As long as we're gentle with that, I think that's going to work. So that's good. Okay, so the next thing to do is to put the 3 Allen keys in here. These hold the hydraulic lines from the pump onto the back of this cover, and they're quite awkward to get into. It only seems to be this model that has these on it. Okay, next we can bolt on the support for the hydraulic levers and the foot plate, which also goes onto this cover here. So in theory, to do an oil change in this and do the filters as they recommend, you need to take the foot plate off and the hydraulic hoses off and the hydraulic levers off and this plate off to get your hand in there. So probably part of the reason it has so many metal chips in it is because nobody's ever done that. Next, we can put the 2 hydraulic hoses back on. I'm thinking I'm probably going to change the hydraulic bank on this at some point anyway, just because I want one with some extra functions on it for when I'm using the spreader and things like that. So this old line here is the return line, and the new hose that goes on here is the pressure line. Okay, next we're going to try and lift this cover into place and hopefully it goes on properly. This had a very, very thin paper gasket on it, and I don't have any gasket material that is the right thickness. So we're just going to use some of this Permatex blue. This is really good stuff. It won't leak if we just put a smear of this around it. Try not to get this stuff on you. It's not real good. You do absorb it through your skin. So if you're doing this job, there's this side cover on the right hand side of the tractor that needs to come off, and this little roller in here also needs to come out before you lift the top off. After you put the top back on, you've got to try and get this roller back in here without dropping it down into the gearbox. If you drop it, of course, you've got to take the top off again to get it out again. So be very careful doing that. It's quite tight to get in here, and it's a little bit awkward to get that in place. Okay, so we've put some oil into the gearbox, which is this filler up here, and moved it out of the shed so we can get a bit more space around it. The last thing to go on is this foot plate here, so we'll do that in a few minutes. One thing on these that's worth noting is there's an oil drain bung here that's for the gearbox. There's another one down the back here that is for the diff. But there is only the one filler point up here for filling both of them. They're both joined together. but it just makes it I guess it just means you get all the oil out when you drain both of them. I hope you've learnt a little bit from this. This isn't really the way I like to do jobs in such a hurry, but this is all back together now and working, so that we'll be able to use it with the hay baler in a couple of days' time. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye!